All right, everybody. We're here for our Q&A session. Gentlemen, great job on your talks. How you guys doing?
Pretty good.
How you holding up on this
Great.
this crazy pandemic era? You guys doing okay? Your family's okay?
Yeah, we were early shelter in place people.
Yeah, California is definitely shelter in place. Mike, where are you at?
In Rhode Island, basically shelter in place to begin with.
Manfred, you're in Austria or Germany? Manfred, you're in Austria or you're in Germany?
I'm in Austria currently, yeah.
Is it crazy over there? A lot of you guys basically stay in shelter in place?
Yeah, so we have the shutdown and we shall not leave the home and we have to wear masks if we go to the grocery.
Okay.
So it's a bit a different situation.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to ask the audience real quick. Everybody, if you look at the Crowdcast app, underneath the video, there's a Q&A section or questions section. If you click in there, you can actually ask questions and you can upvote other people's questions. Currently, all of the questions there have to do with like live streaming questions and swag and other stuff. Maybe stop doing those questions for a few minutes and start doing questions that have to do with these three gentlemen's talks that just happened, because that's kind of what we're here to talk about. So I guess, what questions, gentlemen? Did you guys see Kara's talk at the beginning?
Us?
That's kind of that. Yeah, the three of you. You see Kara's talk?
I was on deck, so I couldn't.
Yeah. That's right. You were on deck, so you couldn't see it. All right. So I guess this question, I'm going to throw it out there to anybody. Are there any good pattern to load components where the component isn't known at runtime? That's a question.
So patterns for loading components that are not known at runtime. Was that the question?
Yeah. It's not known until runtime, yeah.
When the compiler runs.
Yeah, well, no, that's the compile time. Are there any good patterns for loading components that you don't know until runtime? So more of like a dynamic loading of a component.
Oh yeah, now I've got you. Well, of course, you could do this lazy loading I've shown in my presentation. And one thing that makes loading components very, very easy is using web components, because a web component is just a script. And after it has been loaded into the browser, you just have a new HTML tag. Furthermore, there are some workarounds where people tried to create something like a plug-in system. But currently, I would either go with lazy loading or with web components.
Gotcha. So, Mike, I know that you wanted to speak about builders because you felt the frustration of, like many others, of like trying to know what they are and not being able to find anything. What's your current take on like the builder API and I know you've done a lot with it. What's your current take on it, and like how big do you think it's going to be for the Angular community?
I think it's going to be pretty big. I mean, so builders existed for a couple of versions now, and there was a previous version of builders in like Angular 6 of the CLI that it was okay. It was class based, but I think the approach to moving to just functions for this newest release makes things a lot simpler and actually lets people, potentially build their own. I know before we had an eject command for people who wanted to extend the builder by using their own Webpack stuff. But I think the current solution makes it a lot cleaner to do and opens up so many possibilities for people to just add their own touches to their project that makes it their own and also integrates it with Angular's own ecosystem.
Cool.
A great example of it is Manfred's NGX Build Plus. Like that stuff wouldn't have been possible without builders.
No, I agree. NGX Build Plus, Manfred, you're my hero on that thing, by the way. Without that, NG upgrade would be so much more difficult. You really bailed me out. Like, I love your builder, bro. I love your builder.
Oh, cool. I'm really happy it's helpful.
Super helpful. And you've given us like on the spot support. It's crazy. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So we got a question for Manfred, and we have a question for Ward. So Manfred, they're asking, Felix asked, Manfred said ng-modules won't be necessary anymore. Do you think that it's beneficial to not have them at all? Don't you think that they enforce the clean and modular application structure?
Well, I guess it's a matter of taste. I'm sure you can write clean and reusable code without ng-modules, but some people really like ng-modules because they group components together. And so in the future, if this is implemented, I guess both will work. So it's up to you. But what I always recommend my customers is talk to the dev team and find one way of doing things, because it does not come to a good end if some people in the team are working without ng-modules and other ones work with ng-modules.
Yeah. So like half the team's doing thing A, half the team's doing thing B. Not great, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for the answer there. Ward, question for you. Is it possible to inject services within interceptors?
Yes, and I showed several instances in which we were doing that, and it's as simple as any other service class that takes a dependency. Just put it in the constructor, and you're ready to go.
So the question is, if you inject a service into an interceptor, do the requests made in that service, don't they also like inceptively go back through the same interceptor that you're building? So like the question is, isn't there like an inception circular problem thing?
Okay, so what you're talking about is where the injected service uses HTTP client itself.
Hello, there you are.
Whereas I was I was talking about other kinds of services that don't.
Okay.
And yeah, you'll get a circular dependency there. And now it is true that the call you make, first of all, even to get it in there, you probably have to inject the injector and then ask the injector to get it out dynamically. And then once you had HTTP client and then you were trying to issue something, you would have to be very careful what you asked HTTP client to do, as so that your interceptors recognize that and bypassed it. So basically the idea is don't do that. If you really need to go get something from the server and you really want to use HTTP client, you can create a brand new instance of it, shadowed instance of it to use or something like that. But basically what I've done, to be honest, is I've used some other technique to make that server call. I've used actually RxJS has its own little Ajax thing, and so if I'm ever stuck like that, and I haven't been, but if I were, I might just use that and bypass the whole interceptor.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a good point. Like the nature of the interceptor is that it would exist before any HTTP, right? So to do an HTTP inside of the HTTP, that's kind of meta. That doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, right?
Perfectly, but actually, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable that you might want to talk to a outside server.
Okay.
For example, you might have to go get a fresh token or to go get some piece of information from from some server.
Okay.
But you would want to find a way to avoid using HTTP client to do it.
Okay. All right, I see it. So if you're doing HTTP in a service that's being injected into an HTTP interceptor, you got to use not HTTP client module. You got to use something else.
That's what I have done. Where I just wanted to make sure I bypassed everything. I just used something simple, because that's not, obviously that's a special case, and so you can sidestep it, or you've just got to find a way to make sure your interceptors recognize when they're being used. Like typically it's a different URL, right? So if they recognize it, they say, you know what, the interceptor bails out right away. So it's okay.
Gotcha.
It can be done, but be careful.
Gotcha. All right, this next question, I guess, is going to be kind of broad. Someone's asking, hey, I want to know where I could find complete content related to HTTP requests in Angular, all their parameters, how they work over the network, examples for headers and custom requests. So let's say the three of you gentlemen are trying to learn more about those. Where do you go for the best documentation? Because it sounds like this person's a little frustrated, yeah?
Well, I know it all, so it doesn't really...
Oh, yeah, that's true. Wait, Ward, you wrote the documentation. This person,
No.
this is a critique on you, my man.
Oh man, and I'm feeling the burn. I'm
Yeah.
feeling the burn. Actually, I'm feeling your pain. Whoever asked that question. Actually, I do get. There are obscure corners.
Anyone else? Mike, where you go to learn about
Well-
this ish?
I read the source for the most part as much as I can. When docs fail, source code really doesn't. So
Yeah,
Yep.
you're just going straight to the source.
yeah.
Okay, Manfred.
Yeah, so I cannot say much about this either because I was an early adopter. I was really happy when it arrived with version 4.3, and somehow I knew it from Angular JS. So getting started with it was not a big deal for it. So I guess I'm not the right person to talk about documentation.
Okay, cool. We got a question coming.
Here's the thing: if you have a question and you can't get the answer, you just throw it out to the community, and you're going to get an answer.
So, Ward, another interceptor question. Any plans for work on request metadata for interceptors?
I have no plans for that. You're asking about the.
No idea.
I don't know that there is attention on the HTTP client at this time, but I am curious. I wish that person would tell us what they're looking for, and we can see what can be done.
Okay. So I think this question may be a Manfred question. I'm sure that the other two know. So the question is, can you lazy load a component that also uses another component that you also want as well lazily loaded in the bundle without using an ng-module?
Yeah. So honestly, I haven't tried it, but I guess it would be possible because if I think about this, in this case, the first component has an import statement pointing to the second component. And if I'm registering the second component with the first component using this internal metadata stuff, it should really work. The import statement makes sure that everything is bundled together, but I did not do an experiment with this. I guess it will work, and it should work as soon as it's part of the public API.
Yeah.
Hey, free opportunity for people to make an example and get some Twitter points right there.
I bet I would be willing to retweet it, right? I'm sure that the three of you would do as well. Yeah. Good blog post or a nice gist or repo. Yeah.
Definitely.
So Manfred, suppose that you had one of your clients was like, hey, I have a component I want to lazy load, but that component also uses another component that I also want lazily loaded. What would you recommend that they do? Would you just say, oh, use a freaking ng module, or what would you say?
Well, so I would recommend them to currently don't use private APIs. They are nice to see what's coming next. They are nice for seeing the potential, but I would not use private APIs. So there is currently a workaround for this. It is not pretty. If they really, really need it today, I would create a dummy ng module within the same file where the first component is. And this dummy ng module can point to the first component as well as to the second component. This makes the compiler to wire up everything in a way that works at runtime. We have to see, we are in an early stage currently, and I hope with further releases of Angular, this all will be more streamlined, especially when those private APIs become somehow public.
Okay, cool. I think any of the three you might answer this one, but again, it's coming back to dynamic component loading. So I'll defer to Manfred first. Can I import a dynamic component from a separate CDN instead of a relative path?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because in theory, yes. In practice, it is really difficult because of the way how the Angular CLI works. The Angular CLI is using Webpack, and Webpack assumes that everything that is compiled is there at compile time together. Everything needs to be there at compile time, and then Webpack is splitting it into chunks that can be lazily loaded. So the real question is, it is really, really difficult with Webpack. There are some workarounds. I have some of them in my blog. You can use Webpack externals together with ngx build plus. And there are other workarounds in the internet you can find using some unofficial solutions, but there is no good official one.
Okay. So I have a question, Ward. What percentage of your projects do you have HTTP interceptors on? Like, do you have it on all of them, or is it just something that's not as often, it's not as commonly needed, or are you like, no, this is super commonly needed?
I use it. I've used it on every single project. My current client project, I have from memory at least 10 interceptors.
10?
10.
Hello.
Yep. The idea is to bring, in other words, you can put everything in one, right? But the whole idea here is to make each interceptor serve a purpose and be focused, because small, like all code, it's a lot easier to understand if it does one thing well, and is small. So things that you might think you might combine into one super interceptor, I don't do that. I create little interceptors and I just let it pass it all down and pass it all back up.
Is
sweet.
The super interceptor? That's a comic book character, right?
Yes, the super interceptor, and I want to be that guy.
Yeah. Okay. So that's news to me. 10 interceptors in one app. I need you to tell me some examples, please. Teach some of us, because some of us have 0 interceptors, right? Like some of us have significantly sized apps with 0.
Like 0 interceptors.
Yeah.
I am going to look at my index. Did I say 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, I have 8 in this one. And I'll just tell you what they are. I have a debouncing interceptor because I had one thing that the router, I had these guards all over the place, and it kept issuing, all of them were making the same calls. And it was making, hundreds of get calls. Well, I'm exaggerating. But anyway, I debounced them. I have the logging one. I had the read-only one I showed. I have one that accepts JSON only. I have some where I queue up the requests and batch them up and then send them rather than send them immediately. I have the auth interceptor. I have a concurrency control interceptor because some of the data has to come with e-tags in order to ensure that 2 people aren't making the same change at the same time, and a busy one. So that's 8 or 9 right there.
So let me ask, just to try to understand one of those. Those are all really good reasons. So your debounce one, that basically says, hey, if I'm making too many of these too often, slow them down. Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
basically what it does is it throws them into, it recognizes certain URLs and throws them into a queue. And then it has a timer on that. And when either a certain amount of time passes, because you don't want to wait forever, right? After a certain time frame, it will send the request anyway. But it'll at least wait. I think I have it set for like 10 or 20 microseconds before it issues them. And that just helps me deal with request storms, because request storms happen.
Yeah, totally.
And you don't want all of your individual. This is the thing. You want to use interceptors where you have common problem and where anything in the app could be issuing that request, right? And so this was the case here.
Okay. So how do I opt into like your debounce interceptor? Do I just add an extra config to my request, and then that's going to be gobbled up by your debounce interceptor, or how do I opt into it? Because I'm guessing you don't debounce all requests, but some of them you can opt into.
As I kind of showed with the read only, you take their URL and then you pass it to something that says, "Hey, do I apply to you?" And so I often have a function, and the debounce is an example of them, For example, I'm only going to debounce gets, right? It would be dangerous to debounce anything that's saved. But it's only a get on certain URLs, and it looks at them and it says, okay, I'm going to debounce you. Otherwise, I just pass you on to the next interceptor. Now, where do I get that information? Well, I could hard code it in a function, or if I didn't want to do that, remember, I can use dependency injection. And so I could, if I was really trying to go crazy, I could create a multi-provider, and anybody could say, hey, I'm one of those things I want you to debounce, and then my interceptor would get all those, and it would look at those and say, yep, you're in the list, you're debounced.
Gotcha. 1 second. So Mike, I appreciate thanks to everybody involved, the attendees especially, because in case you've ever done a live stream, it's a little bit wonky to try and figure out all these moving pieces, right? It's a little bit like changing oil while you drive down the freeway, to be totally honest. So, so Mike, I want you to imagine I'm someone who, I heard your talk. I'm like, all right, that's cool. What are some symptoms? Because I don't know if I need it, though. Like, okay, cool. Mike just talked about something cool. I don't know if I need a builder yet, though. Tell me some symptoms. If I'm at a large company, I'm at an organization with a lot of moving bits, what are the symptoms that, hey, it might be time to do a builder?
Right. Once it's kind of the same way, thought process, like, hey, when should this become automated? Or like, when should we make this part of like a CI/CD process? You look at the tasks that you are doing pretty often that aren't necessarily part of your current architecture. So like if you're building your app, obviously, but are you doing some like CSS elimination or minification or image optimizations? If you're doing all that and you're not making it part of your existing process, then it's kind of time to think about, okay, I'm running a build, but then I'm also running all of this additional logic after the build has been done or after something in my app has happened. It could be nice to integrate that with the build and just have it happen. So when you think about the tools that you have in the current kind of like scripts that are external to Angular, think about how often are these scripts being ran, and would it make sense to reduce the manual work that I have to do to just make a builder that can handle that? So,
gotcha.
Kind of take it case by case.
So, okay, so I'm gonna try and paraphrase what I heard. If I'm at a company, I've got a significant sized app, and as part of my build step, I'm also running like node script. Mike, you're saying, and those node scripts always run every time I build, and maybe I have different ones for dev and different ones for production, right? Like, you're saying, hello, it might be time for you to get a builder, or to at least learn about it a bit more. Is that what you're saying? Is that like that's like a symptom?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Next question, and I think this goes for at least two, maybe all three of you. The person asks, in your time as a consultant, what are some of the pitfalls you see in Angular apps that we should avoid? So I'm just going to let you guys fight. Whoever talks loudest talks best here, but go ahead.
Wow, there's so many.
Yeah, there are. As a consultant, one of the biggest problems I solve is I walk in and I just ask everyone to talk to each other, because a lot of what I'm solving is communication pattern problems, not actual like architecting. It's just, hey, you talk to me, and he talks to me, or they talk to me. I need you to talk to each other. But so, what are you guys seeing? What are the pitfalls you're seeing that people should avoid?
I think, Aaron, you've hit on the most important one. How do developers talk to each other, and how do they share their discoveries? One of the things I'm doing at my client is we have a once a week, we have a video conference in which we share, mostly I do, but I mean, everybody's invited to share some technique or some new part of the project that they worked on, and get into the code and share ideas. So, for example, that debounce interceptor I talked about, that was a suggestion by one of the my client developers, when I was describing a problem I was seeing. It was a great idea. And so having a regular session in which you just share ideas is I think, one of the great ways to address the very real problem you described.
All right, Mike,
So,
Manfred.
I see two issues. One issue is under engineering. You have one God module which contains everything, but it is as bad as over engineering, where you throw all your architectural patterns into the game without really needing them. For instance, I'm doing a lot with micro frontends nowadays, and they have some meaning, but sometimes they are really complicated. And if you use them without needing them, then you are creating a big overhead for all your process. So I would really avoid against using patterns if you don't need them. And the second one is more on an organizatoric level. It is not knowing your architectural goals. You need to know what your goals are and what it's more important. Just a funny example. I have this customer who told me, for us, maintainability is more important than usability, which is good if he knows it. It sounds a bit funny, but in this case, they have to align the software with current restrictions of the government. And so they need to maintain it, to adjust it to all the restrictions. And so it's clear there, this is more important than usability. In other situations, it might be really vice versa. There might be the case that usability is much more important than maintainability. So know your goals.
No, I think that's good. If you don't know your goal, it's hard to say whose answer is right? Because if we don't know where we're going, are there any right answers? Right? It's like it makes it a lot more difficult. So those are really, really good points. All right, I have another question for Ward. They want to know, is there a way to retry a call a certain amount of times if the request has a specific response code?
Yes, and I'm very happy that person added the caveat that it has to have a certain response code. I've seen retry calls that will retry every call, and like if you got a 404, it's not going to get any better, right?
Yeah, that's the bottom. There's no more retries your way through that one.
1 minute from now. So there are examples of retry interceptors. I was going to say that will probably be my 9th, 10th, or 11th interceptor on this project. And yes, you would look at the response type. And actually, some years ago at Angular Connect, who was it that did it? One of the Angular team did a talk on retry HTTP interceptors.
Gotcha.
And I will try and find that and get that out.
Okay, so I have 2 more questions, and then we're going to be done. First question is, will the 3 of you share your decks on Twitter, your slide decks? They're going to post them out from their personal accounts soon. If you're not, all right, ng-conf will retweet it, but if you're not following the 3 of them, you should. I would follow all the speakers. I follow all the speakers here. They're all fantastic. All right, so thank you on that one. The last one's a bit subjective, and it's a thing that developers are bad at generally, and that is assessing people's talent levels, right? We're bad at interviews, I think we can all agree. This person wants to know, what are the things that make someone a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced Angular developer? And how do you guys differentiate between those 3? I told you it's subjective and I'm putting you on the spot, but it's a question. And I'm gonna start with Mike. I'm gonna go to Manfred, and then we'll end with Ward.
I think, the first level of like beginner, they at least know some of the core concepts, but as soon as something doesn't go well, they're not quite sure how to move forward or how to get themselves out of trouble. The kind of intermediate person would be able to do that, get themselves in trouble, but then also thinks about the higher picture to certain degrees, like how do we structure everything? And then the expert tends to, think solely about the architecture versus the low-level details. Like, they already know all that stuff. They need to figure out, how do we make this app as fast as possible, load everything as efficiently as possible, and then we don't care about, is this NG4 doing everything correctly? There are proper people who should be focusing on that.
Gotcha. Thanks. Manfred.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mike.
Gotcha. Thanks. Manfred.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mike. And also, I would say the only measure is experience. Because if you have a lot of experience, especially with bigger projects, then you are more of an expert as before. So I've talked with this guy about certifications in the area of Angular. And I told them, don't do certifications, because we all know those tests, multiple choice, we learn everything by heart, and then we have the certification claiming we are an expert. So for me, it's about experience. And perhaps one more thought about this. I think there is not only the sole Angular expert anymore, because Angular is such a huge platform. We can be experts in different areas, experts for architecture or for component design, for design systems, and so on. And the one is not necessarily an expert for the other topic.
Okay. Ward?
So I agree with what those guys said. Let me try a metaphor on you. I think of the software development like cooking. If you could tell right away when somebody can't hold a knife, right? That's a beginner, and they take too long to chop the vegetables. But eventually, the sort of intermediate folks can work their way around the kitchen, and they can follow a recipe and stuff like that. They can follow recipes, but they don't have any vision for what the dining experience can be. When you get to the level of being an expert, you're thinking you can always go down and you've got great knife skills. You can make anything that the kitchen makes, but really most of your time you're thinking about, how do I create the dining experience that represents what my restaurant is about? What is my style? What is my cooking? What do I care about? What do my customers care about? That's where your mind is. And so when I'm interviewing people, I'm asking them about their experience at each of these levels of cooking. And I'm most excited when somebody knows exactly what the customer experience is supposed to be and cares about it.
No, that's great. I would add, I don't have 3 levels. I'm going to add one big one, just one line in the sand, I guess, one goal I would give to people. And I think that the 3 of you will probably agree. I know that there's certainly some other experts in the community. For me, there's a pinnacle skill for Angular developers that kind of goes, you're on your way to the next level or you're not. And that is, hold on one second. Okay, never mind. There was a thing that disappeared on the live stream. It's gone. Okay, the thing is, it's reactive Angular. Being able to appropriately embrace RxJS and all that observables can do to make your Angular code cleaner, to make your Angular code more performant, and to make it just the best version of it, to make the least amount of it possible to do the same job, versus your 2 promises, your subscribes inside of subscribes and stuff like that. And I'm not shaming anyone. I don't think that any of us were shaming anyone, right? I think it's just trying to answer the question of, hey, these are symptoms, these are things, these are goals that you should shoot for to kind of step up your game, yeah? Okay. Well, I want to give a round of applause to you 3 gentlemen. Thank you for your talks. Thanks for your time on the panel here, and we will chat with you later. Thank you.